Hey everyone, Professor Snart checking in as we move out of our creative nonfiction workshop and now into something I mentioned in the last video, our midterm reflection point, sort of an opportunity to pause and instead of pressing forward into the next material we want to get to, just taking time to reflect back on the territory that we've already covered in the course. And like I'd mentioned before, writing courses, particularly creative writing courses, are a little tricky in this regard because often the things that we learn, quote unquote, it's not really factual information. You can say, oh, I learned when Abraham Lincoln was born and died or whatever. A lot of it is more either theoretical or it's a set of skills or habits of mind that we just have to practice. We don't necessarily have them memorized, so to speak. So I think despite that, or maybe because of that, it's even more important to take some time to really reflect on what you personally feel like you've learned or are in the process of learning, if you want to think of it that way. So we have a very simple unit here, just to set up as a discussion board, very simple guidelines. You're just writing a personal essay in which you talk about at least three kind of main things that you've learned in the class, and the three is really just for the purposes of creating a nice 5-paragraph essay. There really could be more, but we want at least three, so you're thinking fairly broadly, and you don't want to go too much beyond that, if any, because I do want some kind of in-depth discussion of not just the idea that you've learned, but maybe how it was different or how it's different than what you had thought before, how it has informed your writing practice, and again, like is made clear in the assignment details here, to make sure you're really specific about kind of how practically what you've learned is now affecting your writing. So in many ways, you're almost quoting from yourself, like in the short story, I used this line, or in this paragraph, I did this, that reflects some technique or some idea that you've learned in the course. Hopefully what you'll find is that even if you haven't taken the time to already think about this very generic question, what you've learned, in doing so for the midterm reflection, you might surprise yourself actually and discover that not only have you learned things, but that they really have, whether you've been really super conscious of it or not, they really have affected the way that you're writing. The other piece of that then is that often writing theory that we learn, it takes a while before, even if we're consciously trying to do it, it takes a while before we get good at it. And so this is something that we've talked about before, that writing is a skill, that you don't just read the directions and now you can do it perfectly. It does take time and effort and some failure, honestly, or some doing it wrong, or trying to do the thing and having it not turn out quite right, before you get to the stage where you feel like, well, you've really not mastered a technique, but you really understand how it works in practice, not just in theory. So a lot of what you might discuss is things that you've learned and now are in the process of becoming your habit as a writer. And think really broadly in terms of what you've learned. It could be stuff from the units, it could be stuff from these video lectures, it could be stuff from the textbook, stuff from other students. So I've made an effort to create that sort of classroom feel for the course where you're in conversation with me, sort of, with other classmates, again, sort of. So there might be something that you really saw in someone else's work that was a really good example of some idea that we've talked about in the course. So really get creative with how you approach this idea of what you learned and also where you've learned that from. And then again, a large part of what we're doing is in fact that classroom or sort of dialogue experience. So there is the requirement to respond to at least 2 other posts. And again, I would always encourage you, even if the response is just to 2, to really read as many as you can, because it does kind of plug you into the class as a class, not just this individualized experience. And also the work that people are doing and the comments they're providing and what they're writing, it really is a great source of learning. I mean, there's no other way around it. The more you read, the more you can learn. There's no other way to formulate that. And so again, this is set up as a personal reflection and obviously your personal experience, but I don't want it to be this very siloed, individualized, contained experience. It really should be this moment to have a kind of conversation amongst your classmates about what you've learned in the course. So, fairly straightforward. Again, be aware of due dates. You can look ahead at some of the units we have coming up. We move into poetry after this midterm kind of break that we've got. And honestly, if you look at the grand scheme of things and figure spring break into the mix, even though it might not feel like it, we do in fact get a little bit closer to the end of our course. So it's the end is closer than it might feel like at this point. Not that we need to be looking that far ahead, but it's good to be aware of where we are in the bigger picture. Okay, so if you have questions, comments, concerns, be in touch with me, and otherwise I'll talk to you soon.